Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. Happy first day of July. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Living in the Central Valley means living with many types of pollutants. One of those comes straight from the ground.
Dust have several different health impacts, from respiratory issues to cardiovascular issues.
Coming up, we'll learn more about new research into dust and what may be causing more of it here in the valley. But first, these headlines. A top military commander has asked the defense secretary to move about 200 National Guard troops away from LA and put them on wildfire duty. That's according to two officials who spoke anonymously with the Associated Press. About 4,000 troops were requested for LA following anti-ICE protests in June. However, some of those troops are also part of a critical wildfire response team. The request comes as wildfires become a higher concern for the state. Fresno's mayor wants to move 10,000 people to downtown. But to do that, the city needs major upgrades. KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado reports on new funding from the state's newly passed budget that's making its way to downtown Fresno.
Governor Gavin Newsom allotted $100 million to the city of Fresno in the new state budget. This is funding that the city was counting on as it seeks to revitalize parts of downtown as well as Chinatown. It's part of a multi-year infrastructure vision by the mayor, Jerry Dyer. The state had already committed millions to the effort. But because of budget shortfalls, the funding came into question. The money is part of $250 million total that the legislature already committed to Fresno over a 3-year period. Dyer said the major projects that are needed to attract more people to the city's core are, quote, shovel-ready. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
Starting today, domestic workers in California will be covered by workplace safety and health laws. The laws previously did not cover this group of workers, which includes house cleaners, caregivers, and gardeners. Business owners will need to follow Cal OSHA rules under this change. Those include establishing safety prevention materials, providing PPE, and reporting workplace injuries. Individual homeowners are not considered employers under the new laws and are excluded from the requirements. Shaver Lake's annual fireworks show typically happens on the 4th of July weekend, but this year the celebration will take place on Wednesday. As KVPR's Samantha Rangel reports, business owners hope it doesn't affect visitors to their town.
The fireworks show at Shaver Lake will take place on Wednesday, July 2nd, instead of the weekend, which is closer to the holiday. Sheldon Sandstrom runs a marina at the lake. He says the change is already affecting businesses.
Normally my reservations are booked for that day and I'm sold out, and I have over 30 boats, and basically I have 2 boats rented.
Sandstrom says this midweek timing is creating a challenge for families who would normally make a weekend getaway out of the trip.
People have to take the day off, or they have to take the following day off, and that's not going to work for most people.
Southern California Edison manages Shaver Lake and issues permits for the show. The changes to the date were made to manage traffic and fire response.
It's just a new change for us, so we're just trying to adjust.
Sandstrom hopes people still come out. For KVPR News, I'm Samantha Rangel.
You're probably getting ready to burn those fireworks for the 4th of July holiday this week, but air quality officials are urging residents to limit how much they use. Fireworks release dangerous levels of particulate matter like soot, ash, and heavy metals. The Valley Air District recommends instead to visit fireworks shows that may offer safer and more responsible use of fireworks. Some shows have even swapped fireworks for drones altogether.
You're driving through the neighborhood one day, and there, in your neighbor's driveway, sits a metal mess of spider webs the likes of which you've never seen. It's a KVPR car. Tell your neighbors, your family, and your friends if they've got a car they no longer need, donate it. KVPR can turn that unwanted car into great radio. It's a super easy and totally free process. Visit kvpr.org/cars to learn more.
And now to our main story. The Central Valley has some of the worst air quality in the country, and air quality readings are about to spike as we head into the 4th of July, with fireworks going off across the region. But there is actually a natural pollutant that's growing to be more of a challenge, and that is dust. Dust particles are actually too large to be measured by the standard air quality metrics, and staying protected from dust is important for keeping diseases at bay, such as the fungal disease known as valley fever. But new research is finding that dust events created by humans are growing in frequency, and that's largely due to farmers fallowing their fields, meaning they're leaving fields unplanted. State water managers have actually encouraged farmers to fallow fields in order to preserve groundwater. So this may well be one of the unintended consequences of water shortages. This research looking at dust events was published in the journal Nature Communications by 2 UC Merced professors. In it, they found 77% of fallowed land in California is in the Central Valley, and that land is associated with nearly 90% of human-caused dust events. To better understand this research and how it fits within California's environmental landscape, we spoke with one of the authors, Assistant Professor Adeyemi Adebiyi. He teaches atmospheric sciences at UC Merced. He starts us off by explaining his recent study.
So the report is generally talking about the dust impact and the occurrences of dust in California, looking at all the different myriad ways that dust affect us personally, directly, but also indirectly, as well as how it affects the economy. And the second part of the research that we're talking about here has to do with the impact of dust, how much dust actually is associated with agricultural sources that we tend to call anthropogenic dust in general. So for that particular case, what we find is that farm activities that is associated with fallowing fields, for example, account for about almost 90% of the overall agricultural sources of dust in California, the majority of them being in Central Valley. So translation means that fallowing fields among all the dust that comes from agricultural sources account for about 90%.
When you say anthropogenic dust, can you define that for people?
So anthropogenic is just a fancy word for human-induced or man-made dust. So any human activities that is associated with dust, we call it anthropogenic dust.
And you report that the Central Valley has the most fallowed land in the state, right? So is the dust here different from other parts of the state?
It's still subject to research. And the reason why I said that is because, generally speaking, the processes that lead to those dust emission, or in other words, the mobilization of those dust, they are generally the same. But the composition or the mineral composition or potential disease that may be attached to those dust could be different. We are not currently have a lot of body of work that shows all the differences in all these intricate details in the composition of this dust across California. But we expect, because of the fact that a lot of the dust in Central Valley has to do with agricultural sources, that they would be intrinsically different from, say, dust from Mojave Desert, for example.
Sure. You mentioned disease. I know a lot of our listeners probably know about valley fever. That's a fungal infection that can be carried by dust. And we've had an increased number of valley fever cases in recent years. Are there other concerns like that when it comes to dust that residents of the Central Valley should be aware of?
Oh, yes. Dust have several different health impacts, from respiratory issues to cardiovascular issues to even things that can go deep into your bloodstream and cause potential inflammations. On the case of respiratory issue, for example, we're talking about difficulty breathing, coughings. It could even make asthma issues worse, and so on and so forth. So there are several different health impacts that dust do have on residents of Central Valley in particular.
And lastly, Professor, what do you hope comes of your findings? Do you have any sort of hopes for the use of what you've discovered about dirt here in the Central Valley and the dust and the changes that could be made?
Well, I think one of the things that I hope for is that we've not been paying so much attention to dust as part of the pollutant in the atmosphere that has adverse health effect and health impact to the people in San Joaquin Valley across the state as much as we should, as much as we do for other pollutants. And I think it's time that we need to start paying a little bit more attention to that. Definitely, we need more resources, more investment into, for example, some kind of early warning system for residents to be able to know when there's a major dust event that's going to happen. I don't think there's any of those kind of resources available to residents across California. And another thing that I think is also important, as you may well know, being a resident of Central Valley here, is, for example, one of the major dust storms that we had here last year during the November 11th, 2024, that causes some accident along the way, an injury. And of course, power outages as reported by PG&E. So those things are important. And for the case of this accident that inadvertently happened because of this dust storm, an early warning system could have made some of the drivers to maybe, for example, park along the roadside instead of driving into that low visibility environment that ultimately caused this accident. So beyond those kind of public safety issues, there's also a huge health implication, as you mentioned earlier. So definitely early warning system, some kind of a more California-centric, Central Valley-centric kind of dust forecasting system, I think is important for us to have.
UC Merced Assistant Professor Adeyemi Adebiyi, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And Professor Adebiyi's co-authored study is titled Fallowed Agricultural Lands Dominate Anthropogenic Dust Sources in California. It was published in the science journal Nature Communications. And that is today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden, Samantha Rangel, and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. You can find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
These days, there's so much news, it can be hard to keep up with what it all means for you, your family, and your community. The Consider This podcast from NPR features our award-winning journalism. 6 days a week, we bring you a deep dive on a news story and provide the context and analysis that helps you make sense of the news. We get behind the headlines. We get to the truth. Listen to the Consider This podcast from NPR.